All right, so good evening, everyone. Thank you, specifically, Member of Parliament for London West, Miss Ariel Kayabaga, for bringing us all here together. It's truly an honor to be in this room with so many dedicated leaders, each of you bringing deep expertise, lived experience, and an unwavering commitment to your communities. My name is Neha Berry, and I'm the Associate Director at One Canada. One is a global organization that works to advocate for economic opportunities and healthier lives on the African continent. We're thrilled to work with many of you to amplify your voices. I'm not here alone. Many of you know my very brilliant colleague and friend, Minerva Sadler Gray, who leads on our partnership work with many of you for several years. Many of you sent incredible questions over in your registration, and we're hoping to get to as many as we can. We left some time at the end to open the floor, so please do add any questions you may have in the chat, as that line remains open to all of you to keep the conversation going. We all know that advocacy is not just about finding our voices. We already have them. It's about making sure that they are heard, that they shape decisions, and that they drive meaningful change. That's exactly why gathering matters. As we look ahead to the launch of the Canada-Africa strategy, we know that government policies are strongest when they reflect the priorities and ambitions of the people they impact. And who better to help shape the strategy than the leaders in this room? You understand the challenges. We see the opportunities, and you know that when we come together, we have a shared vision. We can get results. This conversation is about collective action. At One, we are about making sure that the Government of Canada doesn't just unveil a strategy for Africa, but it listens to and works with African diaspora communities to get it right. The government has already delayed. It's a lot of chatter around whether it's a strategy or a framework. But if they fail to deliver, we are prepared to amplify your voices in the public discourse to keep the pressure up in order to properly fund a strategy in time for the G7. I have the great privilege and honor to introduce the women who brought us all together here today. Our dear friend and African advocate in the House of Commons, Member of Parliament for London West, Ariel Kayabaga. Ariel Kayabaga is a passionate community leader and the first Black woman ever elected as Member of Parliament in London and to City Council, where she received both the Municipal Award, World Award, and the Pillar Community Leadership Award for her work in building a more equitable London. Recently, Ariel was selected as a 2023 Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum and honored as Politician of the Year by One Young World. Ariel and her family left Burundi amid civil war, and she experienced firsthand the challenges newcomers face in dealing with insecure housing and precarious employment in the unfamiliar place. Ariel is passionate about helping new Canadians get settled in a country and have access to the necessary resources to ease the transition. Ariel earned her Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science from Carleton University, go Ravens. After completing her degree, she gained experience in government while working for the Liberal Research Bureau on Parliament Hill. In Ottawa, Ariel passed a private member's motion that amended the federal framework on housing to improve access to affordable housing for individuals with non-visible disabilities. Ariel is the current co-chair of the Global Cooperation Caucus and the chair of Liberal Black Caucus. Ariel's experience inspired her to become a vocal champion for the people in her community. She is particularly focused on homelessness prevention, civic engagement, and inclusive communities. In her work, Ariel has successfully advocated on global food security, women's health, global economic and social development, and providing humanitarian assistance to nations and people in need. She has engaged in bilateral meetings with various countries, ensuring that Canada continues to have strong relationships with key allies. As a single mother, Member of Parliament, and community activist, Ariel embodies the qualities of a new type of political leader, someone that is progressive, resilient, and optimistic. She is working hard to continue bringing positive change to London West and committed to representing marginalized voices in her community. So please support me in welcoming Ariel to the microphone.
Thank you so much, Neha. That was a very long bio. I would have cut it short if I were you. But good evening, everyone. Bonsoir tout le monde. I am very excited to be here tonight and to be having this conversation, especially on Zoom, because I think if you live in a southwestern region in Ontario, near the Toronto area, GTA, all the way down to Southwestern, you know that we're experiencing a snow blitz. So how great is it that we have, these technologies to be able to join online? So I'm excited to talk about Canada-Africa relationships as I have for quite some time. I'm joined with some of the two most powerful women that I personally appreciate and love in our community. And I know that there are two very active people on this file as well. C'est un réel plaisir de vous accueillir tous à cette importante session sur les relations du Canada et l'Afrique. J'espère qu'on va pouvoir tenir de très bonnes discussions et approfondir. Je dirais, it's, as I called it earlier, strategy session, talk about, moving forward, going beyond a strategy, going beyond everything, because where there's a challenge, there's always an opportunity for many other people. So I do think that this is an opportunity for us, and I do think that seizing the moment and having those conversations is really, really important. I want to start by thanking many people in this room. I've seen some names come up. I know I saw Tiffany Gooch, I saw Kofi, I saw Liban, I saw multiple people who I know have been very active in keeping not just our community, but this conversation ongoing. So I also want to start by wishing you all a happy Black History Month. I want to take this opportunity to thank the panelists, my guests, and my colleagues who continue to engage on these really important discussions. I'm so grateful for your commitment to the Canada-Africa file. I think I called you 2 days ago and said, hey, people are asking me to do this discussion. And all of you didn't even hesitate. You said, let's do it. So your commitment has continued to ensure that Africa and Africans remain a priority, and that we're not just keeping in the diplomatic conversations, but we're working towards concrete policies and programs that continue to put our communities forward. So thank you so much for doing that and for taking the time to be here with me tonight. Since 2021, I've had the privilege of working to enhance our engagement with Africa, focusing on promoting trade, fostering economic partnerships, and strengthening the ties between our communities, whether it's through Parliament with my colleagues, whether it's through the community with many, many engagements that we have done, lots of consultations, I know, but at least it has kept the conversation at the forefront. In May of 2023, I was with Minister Sajjan in our visit to Ethiopia and Egypt and Chad. Prior to that, we were in Senegal and Ghana, addressing the impact of climate change and regional instability and food security. During these trips, we made a lot of funding announcements. I won't list them all. I think we can share some links for you to go over those. But while I was on trips, I saw the importance of having a conversation around how do we better position Africa to have different conversations, to have a different approach to Africa. We're seeing many challenges in the world right now that are bringing those conversations. I mean, we look at the south of the border where our neighbors are going through USAID cuts. I mean, how many people here knew that multiple countries on the continent do not even budget for their own healthcare? And now they're faced with the challenge of having to reimagine and restructure what investments in their own people are going to look like. And we have the privilege of being able to be in halls of powers, myself, Senator Gerba, and Professor Lowe, who are at the universities and talking with the academia world. We have the opportunity to really bring all of our efforts together to reimagine what this future is going to look like, not just for Africa, but as well as for Canadians. The south of the border has been a huge challenge. I've never felt more patriotic as I have in the last little while. I mean, who would have known, right? Like becoming a member of parliament would have probably made me very patriotic, but I've never felt so patriotic like I have in the last little while. And I get the opportunity, and I think many of you can relate to this. We have an opportunity to play both roles. We are of the African community. I was just at a actually immigration citizenship ceremony, and one of the things I shared with the people is you now have the opportunity to bring your greatest self to the country of Canada and use that as a tool to make Canada a better place. So what better moment than to use our greatest selves from our continent to bring to the country of Canada. Canada's looking for new partners. They're looking for new ways to diversify their trade relationships. And there is no way we're going to miss that moment. So in big conversation, what we're talking about today is really looking to figure out, how do we be part of that conversation? How do we position Africa, all of you, not just the three of us? I mean, tonight I get to hang out with my friends and talk about this, but I know that the many people who are on this call tonight, all 220 of you, really have something to contribute into this conversation. And what questions should you be asking yourself? And I've received many questions from you. We've all went over them, and a lot of them are really trying to drive us in that conversation to try and figure out what is the right thing to do. So we're going to share our lived experiences, our point of views of how we engage into that. And we're also going to make a commitment together, and some calls to actions are going to happen in this room on how we move this conversation and how we keep it going. And it's not a one-time thing. And we have to make sure that when people are thinking of the Canadian African diaspora, they can call all 221 of you on this call today. So thank you so much for all of you for taking the time this evening to join us in this really wonderful discussion. I look forward to hearing, answering some of the questions that you've sent us, hearing the take of Professor Lowe, and hearing the take of Senator Gerba on all of these things that we're talking about. I mean, we're talking about the United States of America recently imposed a 25% tariff on Canadian aluminum and steel. Do we have aluminum and steel that we can trade between Canada and Africa? On February 1st, President Trump threatened to impose 25% tariffs on many other things that we don't even know yet what he's going to pull out. But I think we got to be ready. We have to be prepared and ready to move the dial on Canada, Africa. I received a lot of questions on the strategy. First of all, I want to say, let's have a conversation that is beyond the strategy, right? Like, I'm not saying the strategy is not important. The strategy is really important. Just as you know, our government, when we committed UN Decade for African Descent People, we saw what came with that. So making a commitment to a strategy also leads us into a place where we can talk about how we fund that. But as many of you know, currently our government is prorogued. What does that mean? Prorogation does not mean that all work stops functioning. All levels of governments are still working right now. Our offices are open. Every single ministry is open. But what it means is that we can't move any money around. So many of you remember we did propose the fall economic statement. It was proposed in the House. We went into prorogation and has not passed. So we still have to return into Parliament and figure out a way to pass that budget and many other things that we have on the agenda to continue to move Canada in the right direction. What does this mean for our community? It means that there's currently a leadership race happening across the country. If you haven't called one single candidate on that ticket, I don't know what you're doing. We need to call the candidates. We need to know their names. We need to get them to commit to our agenda, our 2025 agenda, way before they get elected. So on March 9th, the Liberal Party of Canada is going to be electing their new leader. And that means that this is going to set a new agenda, new people, and we need to make sure that we're at the front face of that. And the election will be coming up shortly after that. There'll be a general election in 2025. There's a number of Senate seats that are open across the country. How many of you are lobbying to make sure that we have our voices represented to all of that? These are all things that I think I want us to go into this discussion thinking about. Now, I've talked a lot, so let me stop there. I do look forward to having a very wholesome conversation on some of the things and actionable items that we can take from this conversation. But before I do that, let me introduce my lovely panelists that are here tonight. Now, I have the great privilege and honor to introduce our powerful speakers. I'll start with our moderator for tonight, who's going to go through the questions with us and share the community lived experience and a lot of the work that she's really been leading in her sector. Professor Miriam Lowe. She's the director of the African Studies Center and an associate professor in African Studies and Women and Gender Studies at the University of Toronto. She holds a degree from Paris 1 Panton Sorbonne, the University of Dakar, and Cornell University, with fellowships at Oxford and Georgetown. She leads a major SSHRC funded project on African women entrepreneurs. Professor Lowe has extensive experience in international development, collaborating with organizations like UN Women, USAID. I'm sure she has a lot to say about what's going on with USAID right now. And she has also held leadership roles at the University of Toronto and serves as an advisor for the Black Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub. After Professor Lowe has also, Professor Lowe, in my own personal words, what I can say is she has created space for a lot of young people at the university. Many people that I know on this panel, many people that I know, like out of the 200 and now 30 people that are on this call, I met them through Professor Lowe because she's been a connector of people. She's been a supporter. She's been someone that I can lean on to get advice and sound advice on some of the things that I want to put forward in Parliament with my colleagues. And she is a true champion for the Canada-Africa cause. Now, I'm going to also introduce my dear friend, the Honorable Amina Gerba. Amina Gerba is an independent senator for Quebec, appointed in 2021. She is a lot of things, but I'm gonna read her bio and then I'll do her justice after the bio, because the bios never really do justice to someone who's lived a great life, a big life, like Senator Gerba has done. She, with an MBA from ESG UQAM, she has over 25 years of entrepreneurship experience, specializing in international business development and trade between Canada and Africa. She has chaired Entreprendre Ici and served on UQAM's executive committee. She's a pioneer in Quebec's natural cosmetic industry. She introduced fair trade African ingredients to Canada. And as a senator, she sits on committee for foreign affairs, international trade, human rights, and she is the co-chair of the Canada-Africa Parliamentary Association. Her numerous accolades include the King Charles III Coronation Medal and the Knight of the National Order of Quebec. But if I can add some words to that, Senator Gerba has been a strong champion for Canada Africa. If I can think of the first person, we were both probably arriving at the same time in 2021. The first person that I saw talking about Africa was Senator Gerba. And she hasn't stopped. She's traveled to many countries on the continent. She's engaged with not just businesses here in Canada of African descent, but also on the continent. She's a strong champion for people in the countries of Africa and locally here to make sure that these conversations, these energies grow and are strengthened. I'm beyond proud to be a vice chair participating in the Canada-Africa Parliamentary Association. She's a great chair. She keeps Africa at the top of mind of everyone. And she also offers opportunities not just to us who are here, but also Africans from the continent. And she makes sure that if you're leading and you're a woman, you're a young woman, you're an entrepreneur, you're working hard to do something, she's going to support you and make sure that you have the platform and the space to do that. It's such a privilege and an honor to work with her. With that, I'm going to turn the mic now to Professor Lowe, and we'll go from there. I think she'll explain what she's going to do. I look forward to how she drives this discussion, especially, not, being part of the community, knowing many of you, having worked with many of you. She's going to know the right questions to strike and the right balance for us to answer and keep this conversation very positive and wholesome for everyone. Merci tout le monde.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Our dear friend, Sister MP Ariel Kayabaga, Senator Amina Gaba, and a shout out to everyone who signed up for this session tonight. But before I proceed, I would like to acknowledge the land on which we stand. For thousands of years, this land has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit Union, and is still the home of many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. I'm grateful for the opportunity to live and work from here whilst collaborating, sharing, and exchanging knowledges with people from around the world, guided by hope for just futures. So thank you so much. I would like first to really turn it over again to our dear friend and sister, MP Ariel Kayabaga, as a congratulation, because I'm deeply inspired beyond words by your tireless effort of pulling our communities together, spearheading meaningful, impactful, crucial policy debates, and particularly your unwavering support and investment in the Africa-Canada strategy and Africa-Canada partnership, starting from, convening and mobilizing the African diaspora from the very first seminal meetings in Ottawa in 2022 to the second iteration of these type of engagement in Toronto most recently, and most importantly for being a catalyst in this community. And we owe it so much to you for your vibrancy, your leadership, your vision, and I'm deeply inspired by you. And also Senator Amina Garba on Black History Month. This is just a testament of excellence that we see coming from our community, and this is a moment of pride for all of us. I would also frame the kind of conversation we are about to have here, given the preliminary remarks by our dear friend MP Ariel Kayabaga, to start by also acknowledging everyone in this call who said yes to the call on very short notice, because it does show the commitment to this conversation and your unwavering support and commitment to convening community-wide participative, inclusive conversation on policy issues, on the files of Africa-Canada relations, on beyond the Africa-Canada strategy, and to actually shape this conversation. So this is a very open space of dialogue and conversation and critical thinking as we develop some form of think tank, or, about, what action to take actually concretely to move this agenda forward. I think there's a lot of uncertainty, but we are, at the crisp of tectonic changes in development financing, in cooperation, and also in the humanitarian field, given what's happening south of the border and its broader geopolitical ramifications. But this is momentous. While the advocacy was always made from the diaspora in Africa and Canada perspective to say, Canada, okay, wake up, Africa matters. Now I think the circumstances around, the world development, cooperation, and trade has given you reasons to celebrate. So please, give it up to all of you who have shepherded and put forward this agenda before even it became such a circumstantial urgency. There's an urgency now for Canada. The advocacy is done, but now there's a reality check. The reality check is the tectonic changes in the world around trade, the tariff wars. That is, these are opportunities for us to not only advocate, but actually resituate, reimagine what this new world would mean for Africa, African communities, African diasporic communities from our standpoint here in Canada and across sector. So this is also a call to engagement, a call to think collectively, strategically, creatively, imaginatively, with ambition about recalibrating and resituating what this opportunity would mean to Canada and the rest of the world. So on that, I think we've had on this call amazing questions, and this is just the first of a deep conversation, participative conversation, to be in symbiotic relationship with the diversity of the African diaspora community here. And we see many people dialing in from the continent. So that means really this is truly momentous and a needed space for dialogue, constructive dialogue, and forward-thinking dialogue with ambition, and also a clear sense of direction about where we want, the place of Africa to be imagined, acted on, and shaping, driving government policies at multiple levels, from the federal to the provincial. So this is a call to action and to think collaboratively. So thank you so much for the wonderful opportunity. I'm in awe by the energy, the response, and this is really heartwarming. And on that note, I think we'll have opportunity for deeper conversation later on as the night unfolds with this fantastic panel of speakers. So I turn it over back to you for, I think, Senator Amina Garba's remarks. Thank you.
So thank you so much for having me today, Ariel. This is amazing. You always do something that we have to be proud, we have to, and we cannot miss it. So I wasn't supposed to be here today, as you know. I wasn't even supposed to to talk today, but just allow me to say a few words, but allow me to do it in French, please. So I will say some few words in French because I want really to explain why we are here today and why this is so important. And to make it, I want to be sure that I do it in French, dans ma langue maternelle. Donc, je suis Amina Gerba, comme vous avez dit, je suis au Sénat depuis 2021 et quand je suis arrivée au Canada en 1986, on avait une institution canadienne qui s'appelait l'ACDI, l'Agence canadienne de développement international. So we had CIDA, which is the Canadian Development Agency, International Agency, et tout ce qui se faisait dans le monde en développement, incluant l'Afrique, passait par l'ACDI. C'était la signature du Canada dans le monde. Et je pense que nous avons perdu cette signature parce qu'aujourd'hui, on se pose la question, pourtant le Canada est présent, on se pose la question, où est le Canada? Parce que cette signature que nous avions dans le monde a disparu. C'est pour ça que j'applaudis le fait qu'on parle aujourd'hui, que Ariel, vous ayez travaillé pour amener cette discussion, ce dialogue entre le Canada et l'Afrique. Je vais vous donner un peu quelques choses de concret. Je vais vous parler concrètement de ce que moi j'ai eu à vivre en tant qu'entrepreneur afrodescendant, qui a choisi principalement de faire des affaires en Afrique, une Canadienne qui fait des affaires en Afrique. J'ai choisi de le faire pourquoi? J'ai décidé de le faire parce que, et vous le savez tous, on l'a vécu tous en tant que Noirs issus d'Afrique. On vous demande s'il y a des routes, s'il y a des maisons, s'il y a des choses. Pourtant, nous venons presque tous des pays qui sont hyper riches en ressources. Nous venons des pays qui sont hyper riches en ressources humaines. Et nous avons choisi de nous établir au Canada. Quand on choisit de s'établir dans un nouveau pays, il faut se battre avec toutes les barrières systémiques. Donc, c'est ces exemples-là que moi, je voulais présenter ici aujourd'hui à nos participants que je salue aujourd'hui. Je vous salue parce que vous avez fait le bon choix de venir écouter ce que nous avons, ce que Ariel, qui est à l'interne au niveau de la machine, a à nous dire aujourd'hui. Vous avez choisi de venir écouter ce qui se passe aujourd'hui, parce qu'Ariel l'a dit, nous sommes des parlementaires et le Parlement est en prorogation. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? Donc, en très peu de temps, en sachant que je n'étais pas supposée prendre une longue parole, je vais vous dire que j'ai choisi de me lancer dans les affaires pour la promotion du potentiel du marché africain. Parce que l'Afrique, aujourd'hui, c'est 1,4 milliard de consommateurs. C'est 2,5 milliards. Ce sera 2,5 milliards en 2050. Un être humain sur 4 va vivre en Afrique. Il va avoir besoin de s'habiller, de se nourrir, de s'électrifier, de s'éduquer. Ils ont besoin de tout ça. Et nous, au Canada, nous avons tout ça. Nous avons tout ça. Nous avons aidé beaucoup. Mais aujourd'hui, avec ce qui se passe, Ariel a tout dit, ce qui se passe au sud de notre frontière est un appel, c'est une alarme qui se déclenche. Et c'est une alarme qui se déclenche qui va nous faire souffrir en tant que Canadiens. Mais elle doit nous permettre d'ouvrir nos yeux, nos oreilles sur ce qui se passe ailleurs dans le monde. Et cet ailleurs dans le monde, c'est l'Afrique aussi. On a une stratégie indo-pacifique. Pourquoi pas une stratégie Afrique? C'est la question que depuis 2021, Ariel et moi nous posons à ce gouvernement et qui a fini par voir des oreilles des acteurs qui ont décidé de la mettre en action. Mais comment ça peut se faire sans vous qui nous écoutez aujourd'hui? Sans vous qui travaillez déjà dans ce pays, qui contribuez dans ce pays? Comment ça doit se faire? Il faut qu'il y ait un pont économique. Nous devons bâtir ce pont économique. Et l'Union africaine est prête à accueillir ce pont économique parce que l'Union africaine a décidé de faire de l'Afrique, de la diaspora, la 6e région de l'Afrique. Donc, il n'y a pas meilleure occasion à saisir que celle-ci. Pour la saisir, l'Union africaine nous a présenté son agenda 2063. L'agenda 2063, je vous invite, chers amis, je vous invite, mes chères sœurs et frères, à consulter. Parce que cet agenda 2063, dont le titre est révélateur de Africa We Want, vous concerne, nous concerne les partenaires africains, concerne le Canada. Nous devons saisir cette opportunité pour accompagner l'Union africaine dans sa quête pour un agenda qui soit actif. La deuxième raison, c'est déjà en cours. C'est la zone de libre-échange continentale. Avec nos pays d'origine respectifs, nous pouvons faire des choses concrètes. Pendant plus de 20 ans, 25 ans, avant d'être nommée au Sénat, j'ai amené au Canada, tous les 2 ans à Montréal, des décideurs africains et canadiens à se mettre ensemble pour faire des partenariats. Ça, c'était dans le secteur privé. Ça a amené des entreprises canadiennes à signer des contrats de centaines de millions de dollars. Dans ces contrats-là, je n'ai vu aucun avec les membres de la diaspora. Peut-être 1 ou 2 avec les membres de la diaspora. En plus de 25 ans. C'est pas normal. C'est pas normal parce que nous connaissons ces pays. Nous savons comment prendre des risques dans ces pays. Mais je comprends pourquoi c'est pas arrivé. Je comprends parce qu'en tant que Noir et entrepreneur au Canada, c'est des défis majeurs. Et ces défis-là, il faut qu'on amène nos gouvernements à les comprendre. Et on a commencé. On a commencé parce que maintenant, beaucoup de gens ne savent pas que notre gouvernement a mis sur pied des centaines de millions de dollars pour aider les entrepreneurs noirs. Il faut chercher à accéder à ces informations-là. L'accès à l'information est capital. Je terminerai en parlant de mon rôle au Sénat. Après avoir été active, dont j'ai parlé de cette plateforme que j'ai mise sur pied pour que les décideurs africains et canadiens se rencontrent, je pourrais vous parler longuement de mon expérience en tant qu'industriel au Canada qui a décidé de faire connaître les matières premières africaines ici, les défis qu'il y a, de faire venir des matières premières et de les revendre parce que mon premier contrat important d'un conteneur, c'était en Afrique. C'est pas normal. Il faut qu'on arrive à trouver une façon de fermer ce gap parce que l'Afrique est aujourd'hui là où la Chine était il y a moins de 25 ans et avec moins de ressources. La Chine n'avait pas toutes les ressources que nous avons en Afrique. Et c'est à nous d'aider à ce développement. Nous avons les capacités, nous avons le savoir-faire, nous avons les réseaux. Et nous sommes là, Ariel à la Chambre des communes, avec d'autres, et moi au Sénat. Au Sénat, mon rôle, c'est quoi? Mon rôle au Sénat, pour ceux qui ne connaissent pas le Parlement du Canada, le Parlement du Canada a deux chambres, la Chambre des communes avec les députés qui sont élus et le Sénat avec des sénateurs qui sont nommés. Depuis 2016, il y a un système qui a été mis en place pour permettre d'avoir des sénateurs indépendants, c'est-à-dire qui ne sont liés à aucun parti politique. Et ils représentent aujourd'hui plus de 80% de sénateurs au Sénat. Ça veut dire que nous avons la capacité de regarder les projets de loi attentivement avec les lentilles de nos communautés respectives et à poser notre droit. Je ne peux pas appeler droit de veto, mais on va faire en sorte que les projets de loi qui sont votés dans cette chambre haute représentent nos minorités, représentent nos communautés et nos régions. Donc, voilà, en très peu de temps, de façon improvisée, what I wanted to tell you. And thank you so much for
Thank you
being
so
here.
much, Senator Gerba. I don't know, Professor, do you want to do a quick translation or?
Donc, il y avait tellement à dire et à
I
raconter.
don't think it's needed.
But I know what Senator Gerber was sharing was her trajectory, her role as a women entrepreneur leader in Quebec, and in a very succinct manner, the challenges she has seen, observed, lived, the hope she has for the future, the excitement about new opportunities, and the way in which challenges also can be transformed into opportunity. And I think she's a true embodiment of that ethos. Don't be defeated by obstacles and challenges. You rise, but it's better to rise with a collective, a better representation, growing, more impactful representation of the African diaspora in all spheres of decision making. So I think these might be the takeaways, and she's truly excited and grateful for our sister Ariel for having convened this amazing conversation, which is a platform, which is just the start of what is hoped to be a kind of legacy conversation that we keep building on, expanding to move into, action-oriented engagement. So I think this is also a call to engagement from the diaspora, regardless of differences, to come together and see the real potential that our continent, is for the not only for Canada but for the world economy, and to actually make sure that this potential, materializes in the Canada-Africa, strategy and relations moving forward. Because we also know that there's an Indo-Pacific strategy that has been voted on, supported, funded, and we're still waiting for the response to the Africa Summit. So this is momentous, and this what our sister Senator Gaba really poses is challenging us to actually act and enter all spheres of power, decision making, keeping a sense of commitment to the continent, and self-realizing all the opportunities that stronger ties with Canada and Africa would be, and rooting those opportunities and connections aligned with the African Union. Also the Agenda 2063, which is the blueprint and development agenda that we all can find resonant with our aspirations, imaginations, and hope for the continent, as it is the Africa we want. So now we'll turn the Africa we want into a localized interpretation and meaning here in Canada, and we can forcefully say and act on the Africa-Canada relationships that we want as a bold framework. So, you know, and not just looking at what Africa can offer to Canada, but also what Canada can offer to Africa, but looking at it in a very dynamic, dialectic, and not just unilateral, extractive way. So we need to think about fair trade, bringing still those ethos that are so dear to us in terms of fair trade, exchanges, respectful corporations, rooted with mutual, you know, understanding, accountability, and a true engagement of the African diaspora, the sixth region for the African continent. Thank you. So I guess I can pivot.
Wow, thank you, Marianne. This is great.
It's not a literal translation.
Yeah, thank you.
It would be impossible to capture the richness and nuances of everything.
No, you made it very good.
But
It's
mostly
very good.
try to
Thank
give
you.
a snippet of the really exciting, insightful, insightful comments and
You
really
have the core message.
So thank you. I was just trying to do that. And I think perhaps that's a nice bridge to, our sister Ariel, MP Kayabaga, about the
Call me
vision.
Ariel, Professor, though. You can call
Yes,
me Ariel.
no, you call me Mariam. Now, perhaps to pivot back to you about anything you would like to share concerning, how do we make this vision a reality? What might a call to action look like, and how do we get to that?
Yeah, no, I just want to highlight like the great intervention that Senator Gaba made. Like, one of the things that maybe was missed is the part where she mentions about the African free trade, the internal African free trade. Like, those borders need to be removed. The world is changing. We're seeing how quickly, the realities can change for one country, including like big countries like Canada, where one action can have such a strong economic impact, lasting generations and lasting years. So I think I really want to highlight that. And in our many conversations that, first of all, for many of you who have never joined us in these conversations before, I think it's really important to highlight that we have had 2 summits with high-level conversations with the African Union, which myself and Senator Garba participated in, and Professor Lowe was also present. And many of you in our community were also there to witness those conversations. Some key things were signed. There was some agreement around trade, some agreements around international development. Diplomatic relationships have been ongoing since, I want to say, 2022. These are things that I personally feel very proud to mention, because not only was it our government that brought them forward, I think if I could be conspiratory, like run a bunch of conspiracy theories in this room, the fact that we have, for the first time ever, we have like 2 awesome African women serving in different levels of government, like really goes a long way. The fact that we've mobilized our communities. And let me say this, when you tell me that you've been overly asked questions, consulted, like I hear that. But just remember that every single time we can go in a room and say, have you called so-and-so? Have you got on the phone and called so-and-so and made sure that you heard their voice before you made a decision? I promise you it goes a long way, because that leader, that person who sits in a position of power now walks away knowing not just, your Nigerian name, your Congolese name, your Burundian name, your Cameroonian name, but they now know that there are leaders in government who really do care about our community being spoken to before we make decisions. Back to the strategy. Where are we at right now? I think the strategy, with being careful with what I can and cannot share, as it is not mine to put forward, it was ours to work on and to push through. And I promise you, we wouldn't even be talking about a strategy had it not been for the work that we did together as a collective. I can tell you that we should be hearing about a strategy quite soon. I would expect before Black History Month ends, we're going to hear something. My biggest concern, though, is that, as Senator Gerba mentioned, the Indo-Pacific strategy came out with some big dollars behind it. And that was, announced early on, I think, in 2022. Obviously, we're going to learn a lot from what that strategy looked like and the mistakes that, they've learned from. And we want to make sure that we can replicate something that works with, an oiled machine that already knows what they're doing, which is our public service and the different government people who are doing that. Of course, I want our community to be consulted, because what better way to run a successful strategy than to have people who can advise you. There's no one who's beyond advice. Look at, President Trump. He's got his best friends standing in the Oval Office with him, advising him on how to do things. So we know that things can shift. COVID taught us that things can change in one day. What we're experiencing with the tariffs from the south of the border are teaching us that things can change in one day. So, and what better community than the African and the Black community of Canada to adapt, and including I saw a lot of brothers and sisters from the US are on the call. Welcome into our conversations. We're so happy that you're here, because it's a testament to the friends and the relationships that we've built with the south of the border for so long that are continuing to support us even through these challenging times. But what better community to understand resiliency, to know how to fight back, and to build from nothing. Canada is a very rich country, has a lot of different resources, and has established relationships with multiple African countries that we can continue to build on that and make sure that we're prepared to respond to that. So the strategy, we'll hear about the strategy. I'm concerned that the strategy may not have all the expectations that we have. As you know, prorogued government means that we can't pass any dollar item. So I look forward to seeing what that's going to look like in the context of where we are today in a prorogued government. But what I want to say, Professor Lowe, is we are in a lot of different crossroads right now. Whether it's for the entire nation, whether it's for our community, the crossroads really are hopeful for me. I'm hopeful that if we as a community put our agenda forward and make sure that we can pass it through whoever becomes the next Prime Minister of Canada after March 9th, we can get somewhere. There's no way this is going to get done by accident. We have to be having these kinds of think tanks, or whatever you want to call them, or conversation, or brainstorming discussions, to make sure that we do not get left behind. We've come too far to go back. And I was saying this at Black History Month in my speech, is that we can't go back. And I'll promise you, I didn't plan that, but it hit me in that moment that we are in a time where probably that was, our last History Month as that government, the government that led through 10 years of Prime Minister Trudeau, who led us to this place where we have invested over $1 billion in the Black community. And I thought that this is not the end. We're maybe ending his time and his legacy period, but we have so much more to look forward to and so much more to dream forward to. And now is the moment for us to be talking about, what do we want beyond the strategy? The strategy is going to come out. The strategy may not be perfect. There's room for improvement. There's room, but who's going to drive that discussion? It's us. And what are the different ways that we can do that? I apologize. I'm a politician, so I'm going to be very political. You need to be getting involved in the leadership campaigns. You need to be getting involved in all elections, and make sure that you're giving mandates to people who actually are going to accomplish the things that you desire to see within your country. And trading with Africa is not a bad thing. Like earlier, I think it was Neha and I were chatting, Neha from One Campaign, and I said to her, why can't ODA do, like right now, USAID has been cut, right? They're having discussions of how to readapt on that. This is the right time for us to restructure what we want to see going into the continent. Senator Jerba just mentioned about supporting businesses on the continent, supporting, keeping the money flowing on the continent, right? Why can't ODA, instead of ODA coming in and providing, 5 kilos or 5,000 tons of rice, and providing, what do you call it? Une usine, how do you say that in English? Like a factory that can allow people to process their own rice bags and ship them to other countries, including Canada. I love mangoes. I don't know how many people love mangoes just as much as I do. I think mangoes are one of the greatest invention God has ever put on earth. And to hear that there is over like so many mangoes that go wasted every August in Senegal, in one of the youngest countries in the world, where there's opportunities of employment, opportunities of innovation, opportunities of agribusinesses that can lead us into what the future is going to look like, as the future is AI, is technology. It offends me. I'm offended to hear that that many mangoes go wasted in Senegal. And those are mangoes that we could put, factories that would employ people, employ women, give an opportunity to and I think if Africans were given an opportunity to stay in Africa, they would absolutely stay in Africa. So
Mhm.
when we even think about the challenges, the security challenges that we're facing in the world, and the future of what we aspire to have, we have to. Canada, in the last little while, we've taken some very strong measures on immigration. And
Mhm.
those measures on immigration happen because we do want people to come in and work. We do want mass immigration, especially around the workforce. However, if it all happens too fast, we're all impacted in a different way. So why can't the investments that we're making on the continent do other things that provide the security and the sustainability of Africans to stay in Africa and to be able to do the things that they need to do? And in conjunction, allowing trades to happen on both sides, not just Africa trading within Canada, but Canada trading within Africa, and also utilizing our current African business owners to be able to do those things. I know that currently there's foreign money flowing through Canada, making Canada a greater country coming straight from the continent, but we don't even have a system to record that. So how are we prepared beyond the strategy? We got to get beyond the strategy. We got to start talking beyond the strategy. And what is our agenda that's going to ensure that we're prepared to actually be competitive, not just for Canada, but for other countries that are probably going to be looking for new partners because their one partner has been walking away from the table. So that's the conversation that I think I wanted for us to have tonight. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of the questions that we've received are driven around that, but we got to get beyond the strategy. The strategy is going to come out, but I want
Mhm.
us to have a conversation that goes beyond the strategy.
Fantastic. What a clear, bold vision, and clearly very engaging and touching on so much beyond the narrative around the Africa Canada strategy. This is fantastic. And clearly, understand, I have worked for USAID. I recently worked for the Millennium Corporation, Millennium Challenge Corporation, and knowing the void that the US exit is going to create, is creating already within the public sector, within development sector, within the humanitarian sector. I think we can think boldly around what Canada's role could be in actually filling the void, and in light of the geopolitical shift when it comes to areas of interest, regions of interest. And this is the moment to recenter Africa as a moment of resurgency. So thank you so much, Sister Ariel, for this fantastic insight. And now I think, we leave it to the community to think through tangibly, concretely, how to move forward this vision and get into action. And I think a good starting point is also responding to the calls and responding to the questions and insight that we shared in the chat, because we don't want this conversation to be just the panelists, but it's really, this is a moment to imagine what we're going to do, how to do it, and in a very inclusive and empowering manner. So we can turn to a few questions from the audience to pose to the panels, and to also acknowledge the incredible response in terms of insight that we just see folding, through the chat. Thank you so much. So
Thank you so much. And thank you for that wonderful discussion, everyone. I believe we do have some questions in the audience. So please, we ask that you keep your questions short so that we can get through as many questions as we can. We know we're against the clock. I'm turning it over to Tafuma, who has a question. Could you please just unmute yourself and ask your question to our panelist? Oh, Tafuma, are you there? Okay, I'll give him a moment. If we can get Liban, do you have a question? I believe you have a question for us.
Neha, can I suggest that maybe we open their mics? If you call someone's name, like just open their mic.
Oh, okay.
They may be unable
Yeah,
to.
they don't see mic access. Okay.
Yeah.
Just find out 1 second. Sorry.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Yeah.
Yes, hi, Tafuma.
Okay, thank you so much. Firstly, I just want to thank everybody, especially MP Kayabaga for hosting us, for bringing this together, and Senator Amina Gerber and Professor Miriam Lowe. Just wonderful to see your leadership and to hear your thinking around Canada-Africa relations. As we are approaching the G7, which will happen in June in Canada, in Alberta, I'm very curious as to your thoughts around how can we as a diaspora, how can we play a role in leading Canada-Africa relations with equity? So how can we ensure that we stay at the table? And that as we think about, evolving Canada-Africa relations so that they're not extractive, so that we are focusing on issues that are going to determine the future, like renewable energy and AI. How do we as a diaspora continue to, or even have more of a seat at the table around policy issues and so on, for Canada-Africa relations? Thank you.
Thank you. Neha, can we take 3 questions at a time and then?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Okay, wonderful. Is Liban able to unmute yourself?
Hey, Neha, how's it going?
Great. Thank you for joining.
Great. Thanks to everyone again on the panel. I have 2 questions, if I might. One is to Professor Lowe. Professor Lowe, how do you see education institutions, post-secondary institutions on the continent and those here in Canada, collaborating both on research and development or advancement in areas specifically, whether it's pharmaceuticals, energy, or otherwise, other critical elements of our economic development? So that's one question to you, Professor Lowe, if you might. And Ariel, a question to you. I know that our foreign ministers are going to be going to South Africa in a couple of weeks. I'm curious about if you might be able to deliver a message, and that is we should be talking about technology transfers. One of the greatest, I think, pieces of assistance in aid is thinking about how to get past into the intellectual property and getting access to development around pharmaceuticals that can be produced on the continent or for the continent, easily made a part of trade, which is something that is kind of difficult to do given our some of the regulations that we currently have, especially on IP. So those are really broad questions, I know, but curious about your reactions and how you see them as a part of the strategy and beyond. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your question. I will take one more question. Tundi Motole, if you're on the line, do you mind unmuting yourself and asking your question?
Mute. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, great. Thanks for calling me on. Yeah, so I think my question, so last year, we had the African Union delegates in Canada. There was an event in Ottawa, and there was also a meetup in Toronto, where I was privy to attend. And we know that Canada has committed to diversifying its trade partners, but to be honest, trade with Africa remains relatively low compared to regions like Europe and Asia, right? So there's been a lot of talks, there's been a lot of strategy implementation and conversation and whatnot, right? But what concrete steps can the Canadian government itself take and private sector? Because at the end of the day, we also need to leverage on private sector. So what concrete steps can the Canadian government and the private sector take to build stronger mutually beneficial trade and investment relationships with the African continent itself.
Okay, ladies. Anyone can start, really, actually. Professor Lowe, there was one that was directed to you
Oh,
directly,
sure.
and
Yes. Thank you.
Senator
Thank
can
you.
also interject.
Yes. Thank you, Liban, for that great question. I think the education sector and cross-border Canada African institutions collaboration is clearly a priority and need within the education sector. And I think one need also to address the elephant in the room, the visa, the visa issue, and the fact that mobility from student from the continent is going to be and has been restricted because of the changing policies on the uptake on international students. So African students are impacted by this, immigration control policies, and one must address this at the highest level and demand, more opening for African students coming from the continent who want to study at the postgraduate, graduate, or even undergraduate level at Canadian universities. There's no better framework for understanding and collaboration without that mobility of thinking, mobility in education, mobility for student, and mobility for exchange. And actually the context is very favorable for that, because there's quite some existing framework and opportunities, including what Mastercard Foundation has been doing in terms of strengthening collaboration between African institutions and Canadian institutions across sector. So education is priority in terms of the greater need for skill building across sectors, through the VTech, if we just take the demographic projection on the continent, skilled labor, employability, and preparedness of the labor force for the industry. These are key priorities, in addition to pushing for STEM fields, which we know amazing innovations, even frugal innovations are coming from the continent in the health sector, in the entrepreneurial sector. But those opportunities, the talents on the continent could also be strengthened and really augmented through collaboration between African educational institutions and Canadian ones. And education, not just in general, as a broad general field, but particular to domains and field in agriculture. For example, in the health sector, we see the boom of health startups, so the intersection between health technology, digital, fintechs, and so on. They are all booming on the continent. And these are fruitful areas of collaboration, not just across industry, but also to prepare the labor force to enter this new wave and new age of industrialization that the continent deeply needs. So I see the connection between education, but not education, imagine like just bilateral mobility of faculty or so on, but deeply rooted into critical areas on the cutting edge and the baseline VTech skill trade development on the continent across all sectors of the economy. And I would like also to add, given the rate of urbanization and the rise of megacities on the continent, I see a lot of opportunity for strengthening collaboration through education, be they, mock courses, or even exchanges, private sector education, to actually rethink, these paradigms and strengthen the capacities of African institutions in the education sector, in the private sector, in the public sector, to tackle all the challenges around agriculture and urbanization, not to forget the climate crisis that does demand some intervention, critical intervention in the tech, but also preparedness of the labor force and the industry to pivot and address heads-on some of the challenges that are systemic, structural, but also, based on hazards. So I think there's a need across the board to strengthen this collaboration, and investment in educational partnerships. Collaboration would be certainly is certainly a priority for investment and collaboration between governments bilaterally within African unions, but also decentered to the private sector and to the level of universities themselves. So I will stop here and give the chance to a colleague for instance. Yeah.
Of course. Senator Gerba or Ariel, did you want to jump in on some of your questions?
I will take the one with how to be involved in G7. I think someone asked about how the diaspora can be involved. Again, I will talk in French. Merci à Mariam de
Je vais prendre note cette fois-ci.
prendre note. Avant ma nomination au Sénat, je me suis rendu compte que je n'avais aucun lien avec Ottawa, aucun. Alors, dans nos communautés, on a tendance à ne pas comprendre l'importance de nos élus, de nos sénateurs. Qu'est-ce qu'ils peuvent faire pour nous aider à porter notre voix auprès du gouvernement. Pourquoi je dis ça? Parce que si je prends le cas du Sénat, dans la préparation du G7, il y a souvent des tables rondes. Je sors d'une table ronde d'ailleurs aujourd'hui à Ottawa. On a parlé de l'éducation, justement, de l'éducation pour empêcher les violences et l'extrémisme et la désinformation. La diaspora peut faire des propositions, mais pour qu'elle puisse s'impliquer réellement, il faut qu'elle se rapproche des élus. Vous pouvez vous rapprocher, je ne sais pas si vous connaissez votre député, Ariel l'a dit, moi je suis non partisane, je ne suis pas politique, mais essayez d'aller vers ces gens qui vont porter votre voix auprès des décideurs. Ça veut dire aussi, vous pouvez rédiger des mémoires pour dire voilà ce qui me préoccupe et proposer cela à celui qui va être nommé comme Sherpa du G7. C'est des questions qui sont intéressantes, mais on n'a pas cette facilité ou cette habitude d'aller vers les élus pour leur soumettre des études, des projets, des mémoires, comme je l'ai dit, poser des questions, soumettre des projets. C'est important de créer ce lien avec vos parlementaires. Ça veut dire à la Chambre des communes, ça veut dire les sénateurs. Donc, c'est une des façons de procéder pour faire entendre votre voix durant le G7 parce que, évidemment, ce n'est pas tout le monde qui sera invité, mais c'est sûr que vos députés, vos sénateurs, dans le cas du Québec ou de l'Ontario, en Ontario, je pense qu'il y en a 24, mais les députés sont là. Puis, quand vous allez avoir des nouveaux représentants, des nouveaux membres du Parlement, allez les voir, allez cogner à leur porte, appelez-les. Mais n'attendez pas qu'ils soient élus, peut-être allez avant, comme Ariel l'a dit, allez avant pour vous faire connaître, pour vous impliquer et faire en sorte qu'ils sachent que vous existez, de un, et qu'ils sachent que vous avez un message à passer et que vous avez des préoccupations.
OK, merci, c'est vraiment brillant. Et I would just add that to give you a succinct summary that Senator Gerber mentioned she understands sometimes the attitude of not reaching out to elected members, senators, and so on, but really her message is to be proactive, to build a relationship with your elected members in your community, basically take an approach of proximity, client and service approach, and reach out to them before they are elected. So the multiple entry points you have are many, and clearly she's encouraging all of us to be more engaged, to build a relationship with these elected members. And for the specific case of the G7, not to forget sending proposals to them, writing memos to them, engaging them in substantive matters in ways in which you already have a space, but you're empowered to drive a little bit particular agendas, but at least get yourself known, get your concern known, and take very much this proactive stance and not shy away from reaching out to them on their platform before they elected, when they elected, and finding all these entryways that are in your power to engage with them substantively. And I think this is the takeaway that, they are within reach, and you just need to find a way to reach out to them, network, send proposals. I would say op-ed are also great ways of getting elected members' attention, because you draw public discourse, you drive public conversations, you drive public narratives, and you interpolate them. So an op-ed is also a wonderful way. And I think in the G20 that just happened, a few of us were trying to put an op-ed. However, it was too late. So I think there are multiple strategies to be very proactive, to be very engaged, from the individual standpoint of writing memos, sending proposal, to a collective where a few members will get together to write op-eds, because they are for public consumption, for public debate, and then you are driving the conversation in the public arena. So I think these are really wonderful points to highlight, that the spaces are there. One needs to take the opportunity to reach out and build a relationship, so that your concern, your points, your vision, and your priorities are taken into account. Thank you.
Wonderful. Always so succinct. Okay, we have two more
Sorry, let me
questions.
add just a quick answer to
Oh, yeah, please go ahead.
Ben said, can I pass a message to the Foreign Affairs Minister? 100%. Do I think that the intellectual property of Africa needs to be discussed? 100%. Maybe something to put in the minds of everyone on this call today. Starlink is in Africa. Many African presidents have signed on to the Starlink agreement without really understanding what they're signing on. I was recently in Burundi, and it was just right at the top. Everywhere you went in Burundi, you could see it. And they're collecting data, they're collecting information, and there is no protective measures or no real strong policies that could drive, protection for the communities that are signing on to these agreements. I fear for the fact that Starlink has already received so much intake on the continent without any real discussion around intellectual property, even AI, like how much of data is being extracted from the continent without people's knowledge. Lastly, the G7, just to give a little bit more, adding on to what Senator Gerba said, I think there's an opportunity for the diaspora to participate. Perhaps the community organizes themselves and puts a group together and requests us to be part of the G7 process. One of the key pillars of the G7 is gender and equality, which is the seventh pillar of the G7. So equality part, there's messaging there, there's ways that you guys can get organized and make sure that African communities are also part of those discussions. Obviously, the United States is probably going to be the ones driving the conversation, but Canada has the presidency. So you as Canadians have the right to reach out to leaders and say, hey, we are, the diaspora community from Africa here in Canada, we want to make sure that through the equality lens, we can also be able to be part of it. You can host side events. There are many organizations that really do support the continent. Lots of organizations in civil that could really help you, caliber that. And just adding on to what Professor Lowe said around op-eds and different media engagements, we're going to do a call to action on this call to see how we can move forward and actually support you to move ahead with these type of things and plan a really organized way of putting your presence forward, whether it's in the media, whether it's through your elected officials or senators, but to make sure that we can support you in building a strong system that can give you access to these international platforms.
Thank you so much. For those who have questions, I think it might be easier if we put it in the question and answer section at the bottom of your screen. So if you wanted to ask a specific question, it's probably best to put it in there. I'd now like to see if Anomi Aiko is able to have a question. Please unmute yourself and ask your question to our panelists. If we're having an issue, we can go to Kofi. Kofi, I believe you also have a question. If you're able to unmute yourself, please feel free to do so.
Hi, Neha, can you hear me?
We sure can. Hi, Kofi.
How are you doing? How are you doing? So it was mentioned earlier that I guess given that Parliament is prorogued, there no commitments around spending could be made. My concern, of course, is that, and I've shared this a number of times, is that potentially we might get some kind of announcement or strategy or what have you, and there aren't any real dollars committed to these efforts. What can we do to ensure that real dollars are committed um, to any pending Africa strategy, Canada Africa strategy, um, so that we're not left with just a policy document that's wishful in nature and doesn't actually materially help develop the ecosystem that's necessary to support all the work we want to do in this space.
Did anyone want to take that question?
Hi.
Oh, perfect. Anobi, wonderful. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you so much. I already typed my question in the chat, and I think my question is quite similar to Kofi's own. So I think the we've talked a little bit about what's going on, with USAID, and the shutdown is not just impacting, the US or African countries. I think it's also impacting Canada's investment in many African countries because a lot of times there's a lot of co-funding going on. And where actually Canada is leveraging on the US dollars, on US investment in a lot of countries that we work in, and I come from the humanitarian space. And so I do think, basically connected to what the senator said, that there's an opportunity for Canada to actually step up and increase its relevance and partnership in Africa in a meaningful way. And so how do we ensure, going to Kofi's point, that the Africa strategy does not remain irrelevant, especially in the shifts in political landscape? How do we ensure that there's dollars put to that strategy, and Canada can actually really step up the game through more investments?
I think these sound like me questions. Thank you so much for those specific questions. I really do appreciate that this is like something that has remained something that's at the top of mind for all of us, because as you know, we've all been working really hard on this strategy coming forward, and we're still waiting. And I think, as I said, quote me on this, my hopes are that before the end of February we can get something committed from the government on the strategy. I think my job as a member of parliament, as a non-member of the cabinet, is to continue to keep this conversation going. I think even hosting these conversations goes a long way. I'll tell you, I got calls from multiple people who are in the diplomatic sector, the academia, and we're saying thank you for hosting this conversation. We'll be listening in. People have asked to get information on what we're talking about, because I think people want to know this information of what we are able to do together. Many of the conversations that I have had with you, as perhaps a member of parliament who has the opportunity to go back to parliament and chat with my colleagues about this stuff, have really helped move the dial in some of the things that we've seen. I can't tell you how, how the strategy eventually gets money, but I can say this, Kofi, to answer your question: how do we ensure that we get money? There's no way to answer that question without getting political. And as much as I want this to say a neutral platform that's not very political, we are talking about politics, and politics affects everything we do, where we live, what we eat, the transportation we take. Everything we do is political. So, as I said earlier, how many of you, maybe I can return this question to all of you, how many of you even know the names of the people who have put forward their names? The leadership race in the Liberal Party, if you're not a Liberal member, it doesn't just impact Liberals. It impacts the entire nation of Canada, because whoever becomes the leader of the Liberal Party, they automatically become the Prime Minister of Canada. And if you're not engaging those people, you're going to wake up with a new prime minister that you've never spoken to, you've never asked them for commitment. And in the political world, the way commitments work, they're transactions. There are transactions. You commit to do something, they commit to do something back. I'm curious to know, and this is where I throw it back to the to the audience. How many of you are registered political members of whatever party that the four main parties of our country? How many of you actively engage with your elected officials, with your senators, with your city councilors, with your mayors? And how many of you have ever committed one single dollar to those campaigns? I know there are some in this room that have equally benefited from your support, but I know that it's not the larger part of the community. I remember in 2016, I worked on Parliament Hill as a staffer, and I remember going to many outreach events for different community members, sometimes the same community, sometimes it was tailored to one specific country. And I said to a colleague of mine, how do we get these MPs, the 187 MPs, to commit to the same presence within our communities, within our Black community? And the answer was, it's difficult because the Black community there's too many communities within the Black community and they're very disorganized. So I can tell you, we've moved that dial. Like I want to give an example, really good one. Recently, for the FES commitments for the Black community, we had every sector involved. We had FACE, we had like everybody, the foundations for Black communities. We had the people who are running after the Black justice strategy. Like everybody was coming together. They were sending emails to multiple MPs. And now MPs who had never even heard about the Black Entrepreneurship Fund knew about it, and they were coming to me and say, hey, did you know that the government has given this amount of money to the Black entrepreneur? I'm like, yeah, I know. And I'm glad that now you know too. And the reality is there's so many things to do in Parliament that everybody finds themselves in a niche once they get to Parliament. So if they don't hear from you, they genuinely don't know. And it's not because they're ignorant, they don't want to know. There's a lot of competing agendas at the same time. So I think how we get those dollars committed is through discussions like this, is through organization, is through not being selfish and only thinking about our respective sector and saying like, okay, if that sector needs the support, we're gonna bring our mass. There's 1.3 million African Canadians in Canada. Imagine what we can do when we come together and are able to speak from one channel and are able to give each other platforms. And it's not just the same 5 people talking all the time. It would go a long way. It'd give us leverage, it'd give us power, but it's not just conversation, it's the transactions. Are we comfortable to have political transactions, and how far are we willing to go? I'm happy to support anyone who's willing to go that far, but these are things that you have to allow yourself to think about at night. Why can't I get a meeting with my MP? How many times have you ever helped your MP? How many times have you, volunteered to any political anything to make sure that your voice is also included when they're making decisions? The world is a transactional place, and let's play our part. Let's play the game right. And I think one of the things that we can do, Professor Lowe, Senator Jorba, is to provide you with information, because we have the access, we have the knowledge, we can share the information with you, and what you do with it is going to be up to you. And the success of what you do with it will show with how much playtime we're getting with the country. And that was me speaking as Ariel Kayabaga, not as the MP Kayabaga. Let's put some difference to that. But if you want to ask me questions, I'm going to get political because everything is political.
But this was a fantastic articulation of actual political citizenship. It's being engaged as citizen, knowing our rights, our right to information, our right to be heard, and exercising that power. Without even being political, this is the basic definition of citizenship. We are concerned about what's going on at multiple levels, and we have the right to enter that space as a citizen to ask those questions and to demand responses. So it calls for that kind of collective empowerment of thinking through citizenship and how we engage on questions that pertain to us, that matter to us, that are priorities to us. Lobbying if needed, but the very basic letter writing is also empowering, just getting your voice heard. So I think you've provided a wonderful framework for many of the questions and answers to many of the questions that were raised. Because one question I saw was, okay, how do we make the Africa-Canada strategy as an election matter? And that was one of the questions that was raised. So I think we have multiple entry points and platforms, and this is catalyzing that energy and that vision. And I do believe that one conversation on this is just starting. So I think there's a need for more so that we can get to that collective vision and actually put down concrete, even 3 things that we want to do as a community, 3 things for engagement, 3 things for impactful action, collective engagement on substantive, matters and questions pertaining to our community, the new configuration, new architecture of trade that is coming, bilateral, and, what's going to happen with the humanitarian space and how Canada can actually de-link from many of the multi-country initiative, multi-agency initiative, delinking from the US, which is going to take away funding, but also as a standalone main actor, for example, on programs such as the Grand Challenge, that has been funding so much, along with many others. So I think this is a call to action, and I think one meeting only is not enough, but the next one, I think, should pave the way for concrete action and collective engagement on these burning issues.
Do you mind, Neha, if we ask questions to the audience as well? Like maybe just one question?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I think one question I want to ask to, the people, especially in trade, because that was what triggered this conversation, is how are we ready to be competitive, to make sure that when Canada's thinking, like, we need to diversify our friends, we need to think about in the different sectors that, Canada can trade with. I mean, I have a list personally, and it would take a really long time. I don't know how much time we have left now. You keep me on track, but I can't go through all of that right now. But I'm curious to know today, for the many people who have joined us tonight, how many people are prepared? And when I say prepared, I'm not talking about, like, I know there's things that need to be done to put infrastructures in place for people to be able to trade with Africa. But I also know that there are some people who have been doing this work for a long time. None of these conversations, we're still having them, but these are ongoing discussions that have been ongoing for a number of years. But how many people to be partners in trade with Canada, whether it's trading from Canada to a specific country in Africa, or have been working in Africa on the continent and are prepared to put a proposal forward to trade between Africa and Canada. So that's the one question: how many people are prepared, and what sectors do we think that people are already, like, there's already enough infrastructure in place for us to propose that? Like, if I was to go have a conversation with the Minister of Trade today, like, what do I say to her? Not sure how you're gonna get that answer, but maybe pull up like 1 or 2 people from
Yeah, I know Susan also mentioned Africa Trade Desk is there. I mean, we have some comments here. And of course, I know, Ariel, your team is also taking notes. So if we do miss something, we will certainly comprise what some of these thoughts are and want to make sure it's reflected. But it seems like I'm ready for international trade in minerals. People are talking about agriculture and energy, solar energy. So a lot of different kind of vast things we're talking about. I know agri-food. So there seems to be any.
Maybe if Susan is here, is Susan comfortable to talk, to give us an overview of what the African Trade Desk is working on, and some of the things that, within our respective platforms and rooms, because many, like the 3 of us, have access to a lot of different resources that we can support the community to put these conversations forward. But I'm going to talk to Minister of Trade. What do I bring with me?
Ariel, before giving the floor to or taking the question, the answers, I will say three things. The first is that the minister has to de-risk with EDC, CCC, and even global affairs. They have to de-risk Africa somehow. I don't know how. They have to de-risk. Why am I talking about de-risking Africa? Because I was selling, as I told you, I was selling in some African countries. And I have EDC insurance with very high, selling in Cote d'Ivoire, Mali, Cameroon, Senegal, I can even tell you how it was very, very expensive to sell in those countries. The second things I will tell you as a former entrepreneur and former exporter is to support by creating, I hope will come to this strategy without money, but to put back Team Canada Africa. Team Canada Africa, meaning that we have to show ourselves in African countries with the minister, leading the commercial delegation with companies, with not online. We made online, I even did it for the minister, online trade in Africa is not enough. It even is not respectful for business people. When you see China going to Africa, when you see France going to Africa, the head of state is in the plane with companies ready to sign contracts. And they will sign contracts because they have this lobby from the head of state going to Africa. In 20 years, I don't remember seeing our prime minister or our minister of foreign affairs going in Africa with companies. I would love to be in this delegation, even as independent senator. I would love to be, because I've never seen it. Third is visa. Every time I were organizing, bringing African in Canada, they were the ones who were paying to come to Canada. I can tell you, big African decision maker, the one who are signing the contract themselves. Never have someone had like the very fast-tracked visa. So I will let you with those three because I have to go. I'm so sorry, I have to go. So thank you again, everyone, and hope I will join the next one and stay longer. Bye-bye. Merci beaucoup, Marianne.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Thank you so much.
Merci infiniment.
Sorry, bye.
So people were mentioning FinDev in the chat. I think there's just been a lot of good information sharing. I think between all of us on this call, there's so much great knowledge we can kind of share with each other. People mentioned human tech. I did want to get to some of the questions that we have in our question and answer. Our dear friend Rock, who is a general carpenter, one of the founding members of Canada Africa Group. Hello, my friend. With Africa having one of the youngest populations in the world, how can Canada strengthen partnerships to invest in the skilled trades training for youth, ensuring that they are equipped to contribute to infrastructure development on the continent while also preparing them for opportunities in Canada's workforce? Thank you, girl, for sending that question in.
Neha, do you mind letting Susan speak as well, please?
Yeah, yes, Susan, if you're there, please do let me know or unmute yourself. She might have jumped off, Ariel. Perhaps we can get to Rock's question on infrastructure. Professor Lowe, did you have any
Oh,
thoughts?
sorry. I didn't realize that we're answering.
No,
My brain just paused for a
yeah,
second.
I
No,
think
great question.
the question may have come a little earlier, but I
Yeah.
think it is aligned with also Liban's question. Certainly skill trade, establishing VTECs. I was very pleased to see the GAD call for proposal for VTEC, funded to 45 million on a competitive basis. This is great. So I think Canada is supporting educational institution, particularly vocational training, skill building, institutions, the whole infrastructure and ecosystem of professional development in cutting edge sectors, in high demand sectors for the rising industrialization across sector, agriculture and tech. I think this is certainly a priority that we find across the continent. And along with that, I would say, strengthening free trade zones that Canada has actually spearheaded and still building on that momentum of the initial commitment to reinforce it so that also African institutions can collaborate regionally and also continentally. I think we see a lot of fragmentation, one VTech for one country and then another one in it. But how can we also cross the borders and connect African institutions in a more impactful way on these cutting edge sectors where, Senegalese can go to Mali for, skill on, small manufacturing industries when it comes to food transformation in the agri-tech sector, from the very basic food transformation all the way to setting up, innovative, cutting edge tech sectors around food manufacturing so I think the need is there. It's just the vision to actually connect African countries, pool resources, support these initiatives, and invest significantly on education. Skill trading being one of the key priorities for the booming demographic that is expected, and the youth dividend that is a critical mass that needs education and skill for employment. If not, we know everything. We know the consequences of lack of education and hopeless youth. And whether the loss it is, the economic loss, the social loss it is for African communities and African countries and Africans in general. Yeah.
Can I add so a couple of things. First of all, I do believe, and this is probably I might get in trouble for this, but I'm going to say it because I truly believe this. I believe that we need to reform international development on the continent. I believe that the dollars that go into the continent through international development need to rethink what they do. And I go back to the example of mangoes. If I have mangoes, or if you give me money to have given me money to create an actual system that can provide me the opportunity to not only have mangoes, but to trade the mangoes outside of Africa, including the continent, it goes a freaking long way. So I want to see reform in the sector, in global affairs. I want to see a focused approach on a more trade approach. I want to see international development actually hire more people who are less, not remove them completely, but like international development sector should have a mix of trade people, private sector people, a mix of humanitarian work as well. I think it would go a long way. I think it would also respond to the current place where we're in. I mean, what's not, outside of, the radical decisions that our neighbors at the south of the border are making, there are some decisions they're making that are making sense. Like they're shifting how things work. So if we want to bring everybody along into this, we have to rethink about some of these funds, what they're doing. A good example that I can say that I witnessed myself, that I know it's being done by Global Affairs, is we were in Senegal and we visited I think it's a partnership between a college in Quebec and the government of Canada to provide skills and skill trades to young Senegalese who are able to become to innovate in the way that they do agriculture. I'm connected to some very innovative agricultural people on the continent as well. Like these are like things that we need to like amplify and grow. And it goes back to you know, we're so proud to say that Africa is the fastest and youngest growing continent, but if there are no opportunities in the future, like that should scare us. So I think we don't even have to, you know, in a world where everybody's becoming protectionist of their countries and of their spaces and of their money and what their money does, it goes back to what do we expect to get from this 10 years, 50 years from now if we do not put in the right investments, if we do not shift with the moment and restructure the way that we do our engagements around the world? I agree with Senator Gerba that we should be accompanying companies so that they feel supported by the government of Canada when they go and do business in other countries. But we should be able to pass on the skill trade. Sectors like the mining sector that has successfully done work on the continent should be sharing knowledge with other sectors to make sure that they're also learning and pivoting and can grow and provide those opportunities on both sides. I forget what the other thing I wanted to say, but as I was listening to Professor Lowe speak, those are thoughts that came to mind. And I do think that as many of you are putting comments and chats and questions, don't just put questions in the chat, like put even like really well thoughtful comments in there, because we're tracking this stuff and we're gonna make sure that this is put in a document that is going to be useful for us and a blueprint to how we continue these conversations and that we make sure that it's beneficial for everyone.
Thank you so much. I know we have a hard stop at 8.
Sorry, Neha. Victoria, I think Victoria Score from Africa Trade Desk is also here.
Oh, okay.
Can you check to see if she could join? I really do want an answer for that question.
Yeah.
But
Fair enough. Victoria, are you able to?
is she able to open her mic?
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Hi, Victoria.
Hi, I texted Susan, but she did step away, so sorry. Yeah, Victoria Shore from Africa Trade Desk. So we are certainly working to try and resolve a whole bunch of these issues. I have no idea where to start or end. I'm honored to be able to speak. But certainly the comments that have been coming up are true. One of the things I might add as sort of out from the sidelines where nobody was expecting is actually on banking. So Canada could really take an initiative on improving banking within African countries, because I know a whole bunch of really awesome companies and innovators on the continent who would love to expand on the continent, in Canada, elsewhere in the world. The issue is that they get 30% interest if they try to go to their bank to get a loan, even though they're growing. In Canada, how do we solve this? If I'm a growing company like Africa Trade Desk, I go to the bank and get a loan, and then I can expand. I prove to them I have profit. We're good. African companies don't get these opportunities. And this is something that Canadian banks could actually get involved in. And when the banks go somewhere, the private sector often follows. I don't know if that's helpful or if that's what people
That's
wanted.
very
But there's a whole
direct.
bunch of
I
other
love
things
it.
I can
And
talk.
I think you're also hitting on something that it's a conversation that's already been started. I know that Ndidi from One Campaign did host a couple of bank CEOs from Canada, and I actually love to see that they were in Africa and having this. So I think I'm going to amplify on that as well. And then we also have FACE as well. And I know that FACE is also working on some stuff around expanding what they've done in Canada and basically like replicate it across different Black diaspora communities to really, because it's a blueprint. I mean, we can sit here and complain about the things that are not working, but let's be honest, there are some things that have worked in our favor, and those things happen because we came together as a community and we were able to leverage our power as a community. And I think we also need to do that in this situation. So just want to make sure, Neha, like the chat is recorded and saved, correct?
Yes, your team has been taking notes, diligent notes. Please do, as she mentioned, share any reports you guys have had. I know this is like such a wealth of knowledge in this room, so please do share anything you can. Again, mindful of time because we're kind of gearing to the end of this time, but following this chat, we will be doing media engagement around many of these topics. And welcome those interested in going on record. Please do email Ariel's office and we will actively support your efforts to get placed if it's an op-ed or published. Her email will be put in the chat now for those who may not have it. On another note, her office would appreciate any feedback from this call, so we encourage you to fill out the poll that will also be put in the chat shortly. This is absolutely not the last time we can all come together, so let's work together. Please do include your name and contact information in the chat if we don't already have it, so we can make sure that everyone stays in touch. Thank you all for sharing your night with us. Thank you to our panelists, including Professor Lowe. Again, I have absolutely no business being in a room with such intelligent people on this panel, and especially thank you as well to our Member of Parliament from London West, Ms. Ariel Kayabaga, for always allowing space for us to come together, changing ideas, challenging assumptions, and leaving this room with a clear path forward. We appreciate you so much. Because when we all move together, we can move further. And that's very important. So thank you all and good night, everyone.
Before we go, I think once we close, it's going to shut off the panel, the poll. Please answer the poll. It's going to help us. Professor Lowe, I don't know if you have like a few last minute as people fill out the poll that you can.
I would just turn it over perhaps to a youth voice to share something, then that's
Oh, a youth voice. Do we have a youth in the room?
I think that you have many youth in attendance, and I would like to turn it over to them.
Oh, that's very kind of you to share
final
your
word.
platform. If we have a youth in the room, please put up your hand so we can bring you up.
Is Ayan there? I know they were quite.
I know Neil's here.
Ayan is there? No, there's many youth on the call, but yeah. Any youth? Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, listen, I think the fact that you even mentioned their names is a big deal. So thank you so much, Professor Lowe, for taking the time for this really awesome discussion. As Neha said, it's just the beginning. And I really, really do hope that we can keep this going and we can share information and support each other in making sure that our voices are in our agenda is kept forward. So thank you, Neha, as well for helping. We really appreciate it. And I also want to thank my staff, Sky and Sumaya, for doing all the tech stuff that I can't do. So many of you were sending me lots of emails about, I'm like, I have no idea how to do that. So very grateful to my team and all of you for taking the time. So if we have finished with the poll, I think we can now call it a night. And we're right on time.
Thank you back again, Ariel, for this fantastic initiative and your tireless efforts of connecting us, bringing us together to share some shared concern and move forward. So this is incredible. Thank you for this transformative leadership and the energy you put into the African diaspora here and there and anything Africa related to Canada. Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's humbling. It's really humbling. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.